Am I seeing the
How,
Jay-Z lyric book up over your shoulder? It's awesome.
you, well, you know what was really cool is I went back and listened to the interview that you did with Casey, and one of the last things you mentioned was that you had sent your friend to a Jay Z concert, and I don't know, I guess he didn't like it or something
Yeah.
like that, and then I started wondering, I'm like, well, I don't know if you and I talked about Jay Z the last time at all or not, but like, are you into Jay Z? How did you get into Jay Z? Like, give me the
So here's
backstory
the
there.
story. So I have two sons. My youngest son loves Jay-Z. Jay-Z's coming to play at the Garden. This is probably 5 years ago. And
Okay.
it's like the Wednesday or Thursday before Thanksgiving. So I'm like, well, I'm buying tickets because, like him or not, most powerful artist in a generation. You want to
Hmm.
go up. I want to see that. I always want to experience it, right? So it turns out that's his high school reunion, and he decides to go to his high school reunion. So me and my wife and my other son go see Jay-Z at the Garden. At which point I'm going, by far the most powerful live performer I'd ever seen in my life, which then took me then to start getting into the catalog and stuff because I'm like, the guy's a force of nature. But like when he took the stage, I knew immediately I was somewhere that was not going to be duplicated. So, but I'm laughing at him to this day because it was all because of the one kid. Then he doesn't go, and I'm like, "And how was your 5 year high school reunion? It sucked." I go, "Yeah, I had one of the greatest nights of my life."
That is fantastic. Yeah, you have a number of things up there. That's the decoded
Yeah,
book. I don't know if you could even see. It's actually, no, nobody can see now. It's covered with all my daughter's artwork. But I have my brother-in-law got me the 10-year anniversary of the Blueprint album.
wow,
In albums, actually, it's like two
that's
albums
awesome.
that are framed. So yeah, I mean, I'm just this Jay Z all over the place for me, and
I don't blame him.
something that I listen to a
He's a
lot. Yeah.
force of nature. He's not a usual person.
He's not. He's not. And, he's the only person, speaking of concerts, that I actually will leave the house to actually go attend a concert for. So I've seen him probably 6 to 8 times, something like that. I mean, he was here in Boston with Beyonce. He was here with Kanye. He was here with Eminem. No, I'm sorry, not Eminem. He was here with Justin Timberlake. They played at Fenway Park. So yeah, it was just a great,
So,
great, great show.
funny story. When I saw him that time, Vic Mensa was on the bill.
Okay.
I didn't
Yeah.
really know Vic Mensa, but I'm walking through Copley and I look inside the Louis Vuitton store, and there's
Hmm.
this dude in there, and he's wearing this red leather suit with this black trim. We get to the show, sure enough, Vic Mensa is wearing this red. I'm like, that was the dude I saw at Louis Vuitton. But also one of these guys, you saw him and you knew he was not an ordinary person. Just when you looked at him,
Yeah.
you're like, okay,
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
special person.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
So
Well, you know what? Let's kick it off there because this is one of the things that is just fascinates me about just growth, people, success in general, which is and just taking it to Jay Z for a second is when you watch him perform, and people were saying this about um um what's her name? Why am I drawing a blank? Oh my gosh. The woman who's been touring all over
Taylor
the
Swift.
place now, yes, exactly, Taylor Swift, and nobody can get tickets for. And one thing that I realize about great performers, which will dovetail into our conversation, is that when you watch them, to your point, they aren't they appear to be abnormal, right? You know that they're different, and I think the thing that I appreciate the most while I watch Jay Z in concert and some of these other great people is I always appreciate and think about what's happening behind the scenes that we aren't seeing right now, or what was happening, what preceded this performance that we are now witnessing, right? And in my mind, my immediate mind, because I appreciate it, goes to the work, right? Goes to the detail, goes to all of the hard blood, sweat, and tears that we don't see because they are so great that now we are appreciating and are lauding and really are in awe of,
Right?
right? So when we look at, and actually for the audience who, depending on when you're tuning in and depending on when I have my podcast producer cut in, you're listening to my conversation here with Mark Nuss. Is it
Yep.
Nussbaum? Is that
Yeah.
okay? Mark Nussbaum. Mark and I were introduced by a mutual friend, Casey J. Cox, who is just a phenomenally awesome person
Yes.
and probably easily one of the most authentic people that I've come across in, I don't know, a lifetime, for sure. Has his own great podcast, Quarterback Dadcast. Both Mark and I had appeared on that. And he was kind enough to introduce us several months ago. But Mark is the chief administrative officer of Dexian, which is a leading provider of staffing, IT, and workforce solutions that serves nearly 12,000 employees, or with 12,000 employees and 70 locations worldwide. So let me just officially welcome you, Mark, to the Goats of Growth.
Well, happy to be here, Jay. I'm happy we've gotten to know each other a little bit. And yeah, Casey did us both a favor, I think.
I can't wait to meet you in person too, as well, because we definitely got to make
Later
that
this
happen
summer,
for
I will
sure when
be
you're
up
up
in your
here.
neck of the woods, and we will.
Absolutely. But so let me ask you, because you, just to sort of adds a little bit more context to what I just said, grew a phenomenally successful, great business, Signature Consultants, where I believe it was essentially zero to $1.3 billion and growing now. I know there was an acquisition. Um, but when people hear that headline, so to speak, right? And maybe that'll even be the headline for this podcast. I don't know, is they think, okay, well, it was destiny, right? It was made to be, or some sort of, I feel like something in their mind sort of triggers that, right? It's just sort of it's an assumption that, oh, of course he's grew a company to 1.3 billion, but they don't really appreciate all of the hard work and challenge that go into it. Give me a sense of that, if you will. And what I guess I'll ask is, were there pick two or three periods during that growth time where you saw inflection points, but then also talk to me. And if maybe you didn't see inflection point, maybe it was more like a flywheel where it just continually pushed it and momentum built over time. And then also tell us a little bit about the work that went behind it, some of the challenges that you saw, and perhaps even some of the setbacks on your way to some of your bigger
All
milestones.
right. So first, I want to react to the "you built it" thing. I got to be super clear. It was a group of us who built it. I was very fortunate and remain very fortunate. I'm very good friends, like family level friends, with my
Mm,
partners. Jay Cohn, who was the founder of Signature, who was a doctor. I was a lawyer. He was my client. John Stolberg, Jeff Gray, Brad Rosen, the first employees. Like, it was not a you, it was a we who did this. That being
mm,
said, there's also an individual experience when you talk about the work. And I think the beauty of growing a company is while you're working on the company, you have to work on yourself continuously because the demands of the company change the demands on you. And
mm,
so, like, when I first joined, I was a lawyer. I didn't know anything about staffing. Brad, John, Jeff had to teach me the staffing industry. This is 25 plus years ago. I had to
mm,
learn recruiting. I didn't even know what it was. So I had to, till now, like you said, I'm a executive at a $1.3 billion company. I'm not the same person. The skills that were
mm,
needed, the mentality that was needed, the resilience, it's not the same. So I think there's been a
mm,
ton of work on that.
mm,
And when it goes to destiny, because you use the word that I actually, to me, when you say destiny, I always think you know something about yourself that the world doesn't know, and you believe you can make that come true. It doesn't mean you're going to end up wealthy or famous or living in Shangri La, but you'll either achieve your destiny or you won't. But there's something you know that you're going to make come true that drives you. That's how I see destiny more than anything. Like, I'm going to make this come true, which may mean, and you can see this, I'm surrounded by books. I constantly have to feed my mind,
mm,
handle it. So at first I had to learn the business. Then, we were a smaller company. I had to negotiate a lease, negotiate a build out, try and get some marketing materials, build an HR function, blah, 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 blah.
mm,
Well, then you're at 200, 300, 400 million. Now all you've got to do is learn how to really lead large groups of people you're not sitting next to who are living in San Francisco or Phoenix or wherever, and you're in Boston, how to get along with right. So to me, there were inflection points and there is a
Hmm.
flywheel, but both the company and yourself are having that. I don't know if I'm making any sense, Jay. Help me.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this, because just going back to the word destiny for a moment there, what was your destiny? In other words, when you made that shift from, law, being a lawyer, working in a law firm, running your own firm, to Signature Consultants, what was your destiny that you saw in yourself?
I always had a desire and belief that I could be a really good business person. Like I knew that the world. I went to law school because I didn't know what to do. I was a lawyer because I'm graduating college. I didn't have a job and I didn't have a vision. So I'm like, I'll prolong this period of my life. And I went, and as soon as I started practicing law, I'm like, I am in the wrong place. This is not. And I think I was pretty good at it. And I became a partner at a law firm, but it never felt like home. And my brain always kept going businessman, businessman, businessman. It didn't say business person. I would be lying. I say that now because I'm hopefully a little more illuminated about a world than I was 30 something years ago. So, and I always thought it'd be a simple business. And while staffing is complex, it's also kind of simple. You need a job, a company needs a person. Let's bring them together, right? Sounds simpler than it is. So I just knew that, and I was going to make that come true no matter what.
How did you define great? When you say great business person or great businessman, how did you define that in yourself?
As a person who would do right by employees, clients, customers. I was not defining it by wealth or a number thing, but it would be like a highly admired enterprise that I would be a part of. I was fortunate when I was a young lawyer to join a law firm where the founders were still practicing and they were elderly and they treated everybody with respect and they really valued their clients. And so I had this model in front of me of, well, there's a dignified way to be in business. So my great was dignified, caring. It wasn't great, $1 billion unicorn, stack up a ton of money. Not that that wouldn't be good. That I'm not saying that wasn't my motivation. That wasn't my vision. My vision was sort of
Mm.
this holistic thing where you took care of people make a good living. It grew. In now I see it even more that way, but also business becomes a great place to help people grow as people.
Yeah,
You know, so
yeah.
that's how I define great for me.
It's interesting. Before I forget to make this reference, and then I want to come back to that. You know, there's this. I feel like more of an intention or a focus on servant leadership. And I just put something on LinkedIn today that was illuminated to me the other few days ago when I was interviewing somebody for my book, The Goats of Growth, and she said that her leader, people who she admired, and she tried to do this as well with people that she was leading, is to light a fire in people, not under people, right? And to sort of really, really own that sort of and make that a part of who she is. And it sounds to me like, based on what you were saying, that's where you wanted to sort of tack towards as
And
well.
where I see it more purely now at this point in my career, where she says light a fire, I have a particular desire and I hope talent to illuminate people's minds. That I'm able to
Mm.
take years worth of experience and sit with a person and sort of share it in a way where their mind comes to the right conclusion and they find it and they have that moment of, oh, I got it. And then they go
Yeah.
off on their way. That gives me a tremendous level of satisfaction at this point in my life.
Mm.
I don't know that I saw it way back then, but I think it's the natural consequence of what I saw as my early vision.
Let me talk to me about growing pains a little bit, because obviously you helped grow such a great company, and you did your vision for yourself did come true, right? And I want to talk about your life plan as well a little bit. But what were some of the early setbacks that you had to overcome? Some of the hard days and nights, because here we are in 2023, and one of the things that I've been sharing a lot about personally and on LinkedIn is this idea of grit, resiliency, adaptability, and accountability, and resourcefulness as well. And obviously, to grow in the way that Signature did, there had to have been some bumps along the way. And anything that you can share there in terms of some of the challenges that you went through and how you overcame them, I think would be really
Millions of
helpful.
them. We were a tremendously gritty group because
Hmm.
it more failures than successes. And our coping mechanism, before I give you some specific examples, was, and I give a lot of the credit to my friend and partner Jay Cohn, we found a way to laugh at everything that went wrong. We found a way to find it funny, which made it easier to cope with it because it sort of reduces. If you're not laughing at it, then it looks like a looming disaster that is almost like freezes you up. Once you can start to laugh at it, you can start to handle it. And
Hmm.
I learned that lesson from him, but I live it, and I think it's super important.
Hmm.
I'm going to give you a personal example of what I consider one of my more massive failures. I had the brilliant idea and was going to oversee opening opening up in Boston, in your neck of the woods. We were doing IT staffing at the time, and I wanted to go into finance and accounting staffing. And I had my heart set, and I hired this guy to lead it. And I'm driving on it, I'm driving on it, and then we lost like $1 million
Hmm.
because I wasn't great at branch operations. I wasn't motivated. I hired the wrong leader and failed to recognize it. Therefore I didn't change it. And it was then that I went, whoa, that's all my fault. Live and learn. We'll make the money
Hmm.
back. By the way, it wasn't so funny the first hour that I realized it. It took a few
Yeah, I was saying, at what point were you?
to get it to be
Yeah.
funny. But my resiliency came from the moment of learning, going, okay, I hired bad and refused to see it. Big ego
Hmm.
issue here. You got to get that
Hmm.
ego thing out of there. You know,
Hmm.
that was for me the most freeing moment on the other side to go, okay, my contribution to this partnership is not going to be that because I'm not good at that.
Hmm.
My
Hmm.
That led to a lot of things where my career took me in a full service area from everything from HR to legal to real estate. But no, branch operations not going to be happening. But it's
Let me
when I
ask.
first, there was an ego blow there, and it's my own fault. But it's funny now.
Yeah. So let me ask you. There's so many questions I just have within that one little
Go
part.
for
I
it.
don't even know where to even go, but I guess I'll just go with this. How do you know that that part of your, call it, experience, acumen, strength, whatever, weakness, is a weakness, or is something that you just haven't focused on to develop? Right. In other words, you said it was a bad hire. It was, you're chalking it up to, you know, to that basically an ego. Because there's only so much time that we have, right? And there's only so much mental bandwidth that we have, and you have to choose what to focus on to either get better or to put aside. So how did you sort of negotiate that in
Sure.
your mind that, okay, this is the thing I'm going to put aside and I'm going to, work on something
So
else?
there's an underlying thing that I believe. I don't believe anybody can be anything. I do not believe
Okay.
there was any chance I could be an offensive lineman in the NFL. Wasn't going to happen, right? So
Okay.
I already don't believe that. I'm not saying people don't have unlimited potential to actualize things, but your
Mm,
potential is limited to being you. Your
mm,
potential isn't to be anybody else. I was not going
mm,
to be a center in the NBA. None of that's going to happen, right? Because there are requirements in your genetic makeup that I don't have. So I'm
mhm,
starting from that framework that I'm willing to accept that. Then when I
mhm,
distinguish between weakness versus undeveloped, I love the way you did that. That's a great. I wrote
mm,
that down.
mm,
I compared myself to the people who I saw were strong at it. I'm like, okay, their attributes are different than mine. They're much less
mm,
analytical than me. They're
mm,
they're much more gregarious than me. And I'm like, okay, I don't have those attributes. My attributes are much more in this analytic, and I had an ability, I realized, to see connections across various areas that others couldn't see. So I did a comparative thing. I want to be clear, without judgment. I wasn't saying I
mm,
was worse or better, or these other people
mm,
were so better. I'm like, ooh, I don't fit that mold. I
mm.
fit this mold. But I had to start with what I've always believed, like I said, is everybody can't be everything. That's not true in my book.
So to continue. So to continue with the athletic analogy for a moment, basically what you were saying is that genetically you didn't think that you had the attributes that were needed in order to,
Correct.
right, no matter how hard you tried, you were only going to get to a certain point of your ability. And rather than spend all your time, working on hook shots in the lane, so to speak,
Right.
right? Because you're never going to become a center. Focus on what you talked about in terms of your analytical side and connecting dots where other
And
people
Jay, where
can't.
it took me when I did that, I mean, your analogy
Yeah.
to me is perfect. I became a great whisperer, a great
Mm.
record producer. I am phenomenal. This sounds so egotistical, God,
Say it.
but I, I can sit with the branch manager. I can sit with the CEO. I can sit with the regional. Like Rick Rubin may not be the greatest musician, but he's the
Hmm.
greatest producer, right?
Hmm.
I'm not saying
Hmm.
Rick Rubin's level. No way, not true.
Hmm.
But I'm saying I was able through that failed experiment and to learn by myself, go, oh, but I understand what they are. I have this analytic. Let's talk, and I can help
Hmm.
them unleash that capability. That's what
Hmm.
that became my big secret weapon later in my career was that. And by the way, I cannot wait to read Rick Rubin's book, which I just bought yesterday.
Oh, I didn't even know. I didn't even know he had
He's
one.
got a book about creativity.
Oh, wow.
Yes,
Matter of fact, you know what? I think I heard Howard Stern allude to that actually not
I
too
mean,
long
I
ago.
just bought it.
Good.
But
Oh
so that's
man.
what happened for me is like and I guess if we want to go to the sports thing, it's like so
Hmm.
many guys who weren't that good but became great baseball managers or great coaches. Because you're not that good, you study it a little harder. And once you've
Mm.
studied it, it's easier to see it in others and help them find it. Versus the natural
Hmm.
athlete sometimes hasn't had to study it as hard. So that's
Yeah.
what
Right.
happened for me.
Let me just tease this out a little bit more. Bad hire versus management and
Yeah.
leadership. So you had as you called it a bad hire. Was it that, or was it that you didn't spend enough time upskilling and working with that person to make them better? Or again, was that not in your sort of unique ability to?
Right. I think it wasn't in my capabilities at that time. And by
Hmm.
the way, it's multifactorial. That's what I'm saying. This is like you talk
Yeah.
about a bad thing. I hired a person who wasn't capable of leadership. I refused
Yep.
to recognize it, and I didn't have the skills at the time to even develop them if they would have it. It was a
Mm.
total disaster, and
Right.
but a huge learning experience for me, and
Yep.
redirected me in a way that became profoundly fulfilling and successful.
I heard you say on the aforementioned quarterback dad cast, you were talking about your kids, but when I heard it, I immediately went to business, which is acted as a helipad for your kids where they could take off and go and explore and experiment, and then you'll be here as the stability, so to speak, for when they come back to land. Talk to me about that as it pertains to your leadership style and perhaps the way that you managed and led your teams.
I think you're a really astute and sensitive man. My leadership style is was developed from my parenting style.
Mm, mm,
100%.
amazing.
I was meeting with somebody earlier this week who I'm going to start leading in a couple weeks. And it was her current leader, me, the three of us were talking. And I could tell I was doing it almost now it's just my model, my thing. I'm like, well, you're going to run this, not me. You're going to run this.
Mm,
How do you think about it? Blah blah. Well, I would like to hear how you're going to explain to the world. So I do everything based on the notion I'm here, I have you,
mm,
but I'm going to
mm,
push you to find your limits in this
mm,
thing. So that's my number one model is I am the helipad, I am support. I'm fortunate, I'm generally pretty emotionally stable and can stabilize myself. So I
mm,
know I can do that for another. Go take your chance. It's going to be fine. And if it's not fine,
mm.
call me. When they call me, I'm calm. So it
Right,
is the
right.
exact same thing. Because I believe I'm a better leader than I am manager, that I have management capabilities, but that leadership principle for me that we're talking about shouldn't matter where I'm leading. If I'm in a
Mm,
charity, I'm in a business, or in my family, my style, now what I'm doing with a 4-year-old versus a 40-year-old is going to be a variation, but the premise will still be the same. I'm underneath you, you're fine. Let's see how far we can go.
How about that push to the limit part, right? In other words, how do you do that? What does it look like mechanically for you? And then how do you know what that person's limit is?
You don't know till they fail. I don't know for myself till I fail. Like, isn't that what we're talking about? And I
Yeah,
think
right.
the real skill is recognizing either in yourself or the other, and then being able to scale yourself back one notch and not feel like you have to run from it or leave your job or change your thing. Because,
Mm,
if you use a corporate ladder thing, great vice president, now you get promoted to the C suite and you're great, and then you get promoted to CEO and you suck.
hmm
That doesn't mean you shouldn't go back. How many guys in the NFL were head coaches? They failed, but they are great coordinators. Right? That's the
hmm
key, is to not lose yourself or your talent when they can. How do you find out? You make people keep taking the next step. You
mm
make them until they find a step where not only do they fail, but even with coaching, they can't do it.
mm
Right. But I was
mm
really fortunate last week. I was at Bullhorn Engage, and one of the people I work with, she made her first public speaking engagement and she killed it. But we pushed her there. I don't
Right,
know. And she was very nervous.
right,
She did great. So
right.
now we know we can put her on a bigger stage until she
Yeah.
can't do great.
And what do you think that does for people when you are the helipad? Like, what does it? How does it manifest itself, short term and long term?
Wow. I think it manifests itself long term. They they get to see themselves as having actualized themselves. They don't have to see themselves as being a function of their business or their
Right,
family or their coach, right? I mean, the real goal
right,
is for them to find their own confidence and independence. You have small children. You're hoping someday they love you but don't need you, right?
right, right.
So I
Yeah,
think
right.
that's the long term. In the short term, the dynamic is amazing because at first they're coming back to you all the time.
mm
And then this is going to sound awful if I can't explain it well. And sometimes you got to go, it's closed. Sorry, there's another helicopter there, because they're coming back too soon. They haven't tried it hard enough, and it's a matter of feel, but it's tough. You're wincing a little bit. You're like, oh God, So short term, I try and be really conscious of, do they really need the help, or are they just facing their fear and they haven't crossed the river yet? Long term, I know it works when they find themselves and they're offline and almost like they never come back again. You know?
Right. Yes. Yes. So the reason that wince that you were just perceiving in me was, I immediately went to swim class for my kids when they were really young, 6 months, 8 months old, and watching them swim because daddy couldn't swim and I'm afraid of the water and for all different kinds of reasons. Started took my own swimming lesson when I was 35 years old. Finally, learned how to swim,
Wow.
but it was to that point where they're in the water and they're struggling. I was watching them with the swim instructor, and the swim instructor knows what she or he is doing, and so they are pushing them a little bit further out of their comfort zone. And the kids are crying, they're looking at me, and I'm sitting there just on the edge of the pool, not being able to do much. And then eventually, to your point, they start swimming on their own, and now they don't need me
Right.
anymore, right? And that's the same with to that person that you mentioned who gave her first public speech. And I'm sure there are many stories and anecdotes of people who were pushed out of their comfort zone a little bit as they were taking off from your helipad.
Yeah. And to me, that's the real satisfaction. And I think you just made the point, for at least our leadership styles. It's easier somehow to see it in your parenting than it is to see it, identify it in the business. I don't know why, but then you realize, oh, I'm doing the same because I am the same person, whatever setting
Yeah.
I'm in. The
hmm
other thing that you just triggered, Jay, I don't know if it's directly responsible to what you said, is the other part of my leadership style is a few simple things to guide the team by.
mm
So it's not, I'm rallying my team not about a million points. I'm rallying, like right now, we at Dexian, we're really working on improving what it's like to work with us. What is the experience for a a customer, consultant, employee, even a vendor, even an outside partner, a landlord. Well, all I'm talking to my team about is that, well, are we making it easier or not making it easier? I'm not
Mm.
getting into super details. I'm forcing the essential question on the team because that also lets them get the joy of working the details. Everything I keep on my desk is keeping somebody else away from an opportunity. Every time you delegate, you're actually empowering somebody to advance their career. So I'm
Mm.
trying to give things away, not because I'm lazy. I'm trying to give things away because they're advancing.
So that brings me to one of the questions that I always have about the kind of growth that you've experienced over the years. Because every time I think personally, candidly, of growth like that, my mind immediately goes to constraint. Right? It immediately goes to like there's this bottleneck here that is is preventing growth, if you will, or
Right.
could potentially prevent growth. So, for instance, I interview a lot of leaders about when they have grown so fast, their inability to service customers becomes a challenge because they don't have enough support. And so, what I heard you say, which is interesting, especially from in my business. Obviously, here I am as a recruiter, helping folks find people, is the delegation of roles and responsibilities enables, I think, anyways, the business to grow. In other
100%.
words, because there's a constraint that's not there, right?
Yes. The business grows when people grow. Look, I don't know what it's like to be in an industrial or manufacturing thing and how that kind of
Mm.
business grows. But I know in a services thing, the business grows when you grow people. You get more people and more people being more competent, the business grows. So you
Mm.
can't grow the business if you can't grow the people. And part of the way you grow the people is getting them to do things you're doing, always pushing it. You think you're pushing it down, they're climbing up. I've always thought that we built our business by putting more dirt under us and we went higher, not that we were climbing a ladder. And that dirt is human beings building their lives, where they then started out. Let's talk about our industry. They started out as a recruiter, they become a salesperson, then they're running a branch, then they're running a region, and then, right, and they become a vice president. That means they learned, they grew, we grew. Everybody,
Mm-hmm.
everybody wins if everybody's growing. But you can't grow if you
Yes.
have to control. Therefore, you can't control everything. You have to
Mm.
learn to let it go and
Mm.
accept they're not going to do it how you did it, and maybe not as good, but so what? If
Mm.
I got 8 people doing 80% of what I could do, that's 640 versus my 100. I'll take eight
Right.
80%ers versus 100%er.
Yes. Yes. It's funny going into 2021. I think it was the 2021 or I can't remember if it was 20. Yeah, I think it was 2021. And I said to myself, finally, I said, this is a mantra going in. I said, all right, Jay, here's the deal. I'm like, stop putting all of your time and energy into trying to generate $1 million because that was the number at the time. I said, put all of your time and energy into building a team that will generate $1 million, right?
100%.
And that mind shift,
Because think about what that meant, because now you know how to develop a
right?
team, which means you can keep going. Now go two, now go five, go
Mm-hmm.
10. Because now
Right.
you've learned the more important skill and their lives were better.
Yes. Yes, for sure. And you can see it too,
Yes.
which is fun and amazing in so many different ways. Um, Let me ask you this because I feel like as we're having this conversation and people are listening, that again, they are listening to you and I think they're taking for granted your own personal growth. In other words, it just happened. But as you're talking about delegating and helping others, I can't help but think that, at some points you had your own growth that you needed to experience. So you talked about the failure that you had in hiring and in managing that person. You just alluded to, basically building an organization that can grow and thrive based on some of your principles. As you started um, growing the team and adding more responsibilities to yourself, I guess, how did you develop underdeveloped skills?
Sure.
What were there people internally? Were there people externally? Like, how did you push your own self, or who did push you to your limit to help you break through so that you could continue to thrive?
So I think you mentioned several of the factors. I almost always have had a coach. My first business
Mm,
coach was somebody, a good guy, been in the industry, but he's kind of coached me from, let's call it, from 18 million to 40 million. But that's been as far as he went. Then
mm,
I joined a Vistage group, and I was with a bunch of CEOs, even though I wasn't a CEO, and that was sort of like 40 to 80 million. Then
mm,
I was very lucky. I got introduced to a coach, a woman named Kathy McCullough out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And
mm,
Kathy, these are all the external. I'm going to get to internal in a second. And
mm,
Kathy's a remarkable woman. And she put me through a battery of psychological tests and sat with me for a day and did 360s on all the people working for me and basically went, you need to work on this, you need to work on this. And we were in a small room for like 6 hours. And then she worked with me every month for several years. So I've always had a coach. And
mm,
like my partner Jay he was the CEO. He got a coach who'd been a CEO of a $4 billion company. So we were
mm,
huge believers in external coaching. My partner Jeff Gray introduced us to Rhythm Systems and Patrick Tian. Patrick is a great coach. And so
mm,
always had coaches. Our
mm,
partnership and friendship also was a very authentic, open environment. You suck at this, you're good at this. When they would tell
mm,
me that, I was assuming it was fact. I was not
mm,
going to fight that because they loved
mm,
me, they trusted me, and it. What would make me think I knew what the hell was going on, right? So,
mm,
so you had external coaching and an internal, really forthright, frank. And I'm going to tell you how close these relationships are. I
mm.
have a son who's getting married. Jay, who's my partner, is going to officiate the wedding. My other partner and friend, Mike Charrington, his daughter is going to be a flower girl at my son's wedding. Like these relationships. So when they tell you you suck,
Right, right,
right?
yeah,
So we have
yeah,
the
right.
internal, the external, and I have a very, I like to read, I like to listen to podcasts. I'm taking in information all the time. So I have the external coaching, partners who are honest, truly love you because they're telling you the truth,
Mm-hmm.
which also meant your humility was in check. In other words, if they tell you you're great at something, then you could be great at that. You don't have to
Right,
pretend you're not. But
right.
I'm like next to me, I have 5 books. I'm one third of the way through all 5 of them. I'm always shoving stuff in my brain. And the most
Mm-hmm.
important book I read was Carolyn Dweck's book, Mindset, where she's the psychologist. And she was a college professor, and she wrote a book on all the studies that show the key to your ability to grow is your belief in your ability to grow. If you have a fixed mindset that I am just what I am, you can't. And the scientific
Mm,
studies show this, but if you believe you're capable, you can. That book was like an unleasher for me. I'm like, I'm going
mm.
with this.
Amazing.
Mindset. Dweck is the author.
DWECK.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. What were your self-limiting beliefs?
It's hard to remember because I went through so many processes to
Mm.
destroy them, including even Anthony Robbins seminars. But
Oh wow.
I always had a belief, some set of beliefs that these people who were slightly older and more experienced than me, therefore were better. So I was not,
Mm,
at first, I was not willing to push myself past them and unleash all myself. So I had a limiting belief that
mm,
others were way better. I had a
mm,
limiting belief about my creativity that
mm,
I got through. Um, I think those were the two like biggest stomach blocks
mm,
that I always thought these other people were better and like
mm,
I should just stay here and that they're
mm,
creative, I'm not. Until I went back and going, well, it depends how you define creative. And my
mm.
ability to see metaphors and connections between things is unique to me, even if I don't necessarily take a blank piece of paper, right? It's a different creative process. So those were, I
Yes.
think, my two biggest.
How did you get over them? Like, for instance, the belief about they're better than you or people are better than you. I know obviously there was coaching, but what sort of work did you need to do, or what struggles
I
did
had
you?
to struggle with the fear. Okay,
Mhm.
if I try this and I fail, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
I had to struggle with the fear of letting go of the belief.
Okay. Yep.
And then
Yep.
I had to talk to myself and with my coaches of, But what if you don't let go of the belief? So I sort of changed myself through a much greater fear, a much greater pain of, oh my God, I'm going to become Willy Loman. I'm going to be at the end of my life, and I will never try.
Mm,
Right. So I crushed
mm,
that fear with the fear of, what if I give into this fear? What will I be when I'm 60?
right.
Now that didn't happen in
Right.
one self conversation. I want to be clear. That was a
Yes.
year of, but ultimately I said, well, if I stay in this mindset, what will that mean?
Hmm.
At Dweck's book, and then as to the creativity, that was my partners. They're like, you keep looking at us and the way we do it as
Mm,
creatives, but you do this. And they were the one who
mm.
showed me, you link this to that, and you that we don't necessarily see those linkages. And I have a unique organizational ability, so I can move things along so they can see things further. So that really came from my friends, partners. But the first one was
So
a fear
fast.
factor for sure.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. I want to come back to fact in belief. I mean, fact in truth. When you were talking about, your coaches and also internally, when they say something, you took it as fact and truth. And I just sort of want to make a comment, I guess, which is that I feel like when you have those kinds of relationships, as a leader, if you can develop that kind of relationship where, when you are being that direct and truthful about somebody's performance or the way that where they are at that particular moment in time, that they will take it as fact. And it gives them a lot of credit, I think, for being able to build that relationship with you to the point where, you are taking it as fact. Because the quicker you take it as fact, and the quicker you take it as truth, then you can actually do something
Right?
about it, right? You're willing to do something about it, as opposed to just sort of shoving it aside and putting it off as criticism or something else,
And
right?
I agree. And what I chose to do was say, even if they're wrong, I'm better off trusting their view of me than my view of me, and go down the road they're
Right.
encouraging me
Right.
on it. So let's say they're wrong 2 out of 10 times, they're right 8 out of 10 times. I'm going to be way over.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so this, like, if Jay or John or Jeff or Brad would go, you're wrong. And I was going to run with that. Not like you're wrong about 2 + 2 = 4, but
Mm-hmm.
you're not doing the right thing, or you're giving into your fears, or you're being, short sighted. I was going to listen to that and treat it as true till it proved untrue. Versus,
Right.
because why are they telling me? They have no reason to
Right.
hurt me.
Right.
That was a
Yeah.
big thing. And I think we all did
Mm,
that for each other. And I think it
mm,
accounts for a big part of our success. And even as I add new partners and new relationships, I'm looking for that level of relationship.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You know,
I alluded to, man, there's so many things that I want to talk to you about. I just, just from our previous conversation, the conversation that you had on Quarterback Dadcast, and just so many things that are coming out here today. Um, I want to go to the life plan that I alluded to earlier. I know that you had said that I believe you were 25 when you wrote your first life plan.
yes.
Before we get into it specifically, what was happening at 25 that was the impetus for that life plan?
I'd just gotten married, and I just
Mm,
started working for a living. And I woke
mm,
up and went, everybody has always told me how to get here.
mm,
Nobody, the world gives you a plan from kind of birth through high school,
right,
college, right? Up through
right,
there, you're on a train track. You are going where the track, not for every single one of us, but by and large, and for a person
mm-hmm,
like me,
mm,
I was in a
yeah,
train car. Whoever laid those tracks was taking me there.
okay,
Well,
yeah,
now I got to the station. I got off the train. They handed me my bag. They handed me this woman I had to support. There were no more train tracks. I had no choice. Like, okay,
mm,
I got to figure out where I'm going to lay the track now. It was that simple. Like,
mm.
did you know?
But, so, okay, so let me just rewind the clock a little
Yeah,
bit further back then, I guess, because what I'm trying to figure out now is, in other words, I was 25 once, right? I got married actually at 36 hours later. To your point, which is very poignant, there was no plan. Nobody sort of gave me a roadmap and said, okay, now this is what you got to do next. This is what you got to do next. I did not stop and write a life plan. Here I am, 40, almost 48, still have not stopped to write a life plan, even on your advice, frankly, when we talked a few months ago. I didn't do it. You did. Wh- and nobody, I don't think anybody suggested it to you at 25. So where in your background or life did you say, did this come from, I guess? Or was it just something innate that you just sort of said, aha, I got to do this, and that's it?
I think it was innate. It was just something. There was just it just had to
Mm,
be like
mm,
you know. I think other people. I don't. I'm just going to go with innate. It's like people ask a songwriter, "Where did that song come from?" It was in the air. I don't. I really don't know, Jay. I know,
it's amazing.
and I know I believe in it for me, and I believe in it for
Mm,
lots of people. I still believe in it for you, even though you haven't done it.
mm,
I don't think that would work for. It doesn't work for every person if you don't
mm,
really. If you're more, I'm just going to float along, and whatever happens, happens. There was
mm,
something in me. Let's go back to that destiny thing again, right?
mm,
That I wanted to discover that. I had this innate feeling to go somewhere. I was in a text conversation with my sister Marcia. She lives in Detroit, and I left Detroit many years. I've lived more of my life outside of where I grew up than I have. And I said to her, I was just always on an odyssey. I don't know where that came from, Jay. I just wanted to go
mm,
somewhere, do
mm,
something, learn something, push it. It's just how I came out. For those who are believers, it was the Lord's will.
yes. So tell me more about the life plan then for everybody who doesn't know. Break that down for me in terms of what was on the plan and how you've managed it since.
So it's actually right next to me as I talk to you because it sits in my calendar every day. When it first started out, and I give this to young people I work with, I did it in five things. And I think somebody gave me the five things once I mentioned it: my fitness, my finances, my family, my friendship, and my faith. And faith doesn't have to be religion, it's your spiritual place in the universe, however you define it. And so once I said I was writing it, I got that from somebody. I don't recall who, I did not invent it. So I
Mm,
just started to craft a vision around those five things. 37 years later, I have a much more detailed thing. I have a vision for who I want to be as a person, who I want to be as a husband, who I want to be as a father, father in law. We're creative, and it's pages and pages. I force myself to imagine my future and define what I think is in my way and what boosts me. So,
mm,
what would be in my way? Being impatient with my wife is in my way of my goal to have a loving, nurturing relationship with her. So I've identified.
mm,
I'm not saying I'm not impatient, but when it comes up
mm,
and I'm always reading my plan, it reminds me, don't be impatient,
mm,
right? So I have makers and breakers. What advances me? Well, I went to the gym this morning. That's a maker towards my fitness vision. Breaker, I had a very large dinner last night with two cocktails, right? That's not really getting me to my goal, except part of my goal is to enjoy the pleasures of the world. And there, you can have
mm,
contradictory things. So
mm,
I went from a clear vision on, family, faith, friends, finance, fitness to detailed family. Now is broken down because I have different roles in my family,
mm,
right? And
mm,
I have finances grew into business, not just savings. And
mm.
it is now 6 pages of single space stuff with a clear vision, makers, breakers, goals, action steps, and I never stop changing it.
Yeah, tell me about that. You tell me about, first of all, is it a Word doc? Is it a Google Doc? Is it like
It is a Word doc,
okay.
single spaced, that I print because I'm so old. I use a Franklin Planner. I print 2 pages on one, fold it, pop it, and I read it every week. And I read it with a pen in my hand. And I read it that way, Jay, because what I envisioned for myself was before I had this week's experiences or this year's
Mm,
experiences. So my vision of what a family was when I was 25 was we'll have a couple kids, they'll go to school, but and well, I'm going to be 62. I have a child getting married. My kids work for a living. Like my role as a father is different than I conceived of then.
right.
It has to change. I've climbed a mountain, there's a new horizon. So it's a map, but it's not a fixed map because it changes with my experiences.
Do you review it at the same day and same time every week?
Pretty
Do you have it
close.
like
Sunday
sort of count
mornings. Sunday mornings.
um,
It may,
Sunday
yeah,
mornings?
it may be at 10 a.m. It may be at 11 a.m. It may be slips, but it's essentially Sunday mornings. Wake up, get in some exercise, have some breakfast, go read it. And then I think about what I want to do the next week. I do that as part of my weekly planning process.
How long are you? How long is that process? In other words, when you're reading it, you're updating it, you're thinking about it. Like, is it an hour? Is it 2 hours? Is it? Tell me about that.
12 minutes, 10 minutes.
12 minutes. Wow. Okay.
It's always
Yep.
happening. It's
Yes.
now the first write up of the first 6 page when it converted from the 5S, that was hours over weeks. And
Okay.
I don't do it so much anymore, but when I was really forming the pillars, I was showing it to people I trusted to get feedback. I might not show them all
Mm-hmm.
parts of it because maybe I was shy or embarrassed, but like I would show different pieces to different people. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but now that I've been doing it so long, it just 10, 15 minutes. And I may focus on any given week in just a part of it.
Okay. Yep. Okay. There was something else I was gonna. Oh, how specific do you get within these five um, categories? For instance, like with fitness, do you say, is there a particular weight that you want to maintain? Is there a particular level of stamina when you
So
run
I'm
that you
pulling
want
to
to?
look at it right now, right? So
Okay.
under that one,
Okay.
right,
Yeah.
my main goal is to um, be healthy for my age as I write it now. Because
Okay.
what I would expect of myself in my 60s is different than what I would have in my 30s, right?
Mm-hmm.
175 pounds, good balance, good strength, good flexibility, blood pressure in 120 to 125 over 80 to 85, cholesterol at 155 or below, good muscle
Wow.
mass. Exercise 5 times a week vigorously, stretch every day, get rest, limit alcohol intake, eat healthy foods. I mean, super detailed.
Wow. That is super
Now,
detailed.
maybe not be come across to people as I'm super neurotic. I don't know, but my belief is the more I can see it in my mind's eye, the more likely it is to come true. I'm playing a probability game.
Well, that's why I wanted to go over it because I think that I mean, it doesn't sound neurotic to me at all. It sounds admirable and sounds useful and practical in every single way. And frankly, I mean, in this world of big data and all of this information and AI and the whole nine, it's like to do something um, as centered as that, right? Is focusing on yourself and where you want to be um, outside of anything else. I think is phenomenal. And one of the things that hopefully people are getting from this, I know I certainly am, is that it's not like you weren't an overnight success
No
with
such
this,
thing.
right? This is these are things that you've been, to go back to the flywheel analogy, where you've been moving that flywheel and you haven't stopped pushing the flywheel. And the problem is that when you stop pushing the flywheel, that flywheel stops moving, right? And
Right.
so you have to be able to do these things. And one of the great things that you do, of course, is that life plan,
Hey, Jake,
which I think,
can I link this to what we were talking about earlier as a leader?
sure, yeah,
I feel like if a leader isn't taking care of himself or herself, they can't take care of the others. So I'm doing my Sunday, I'm getting my personal vision, I'm planning my week, I'm setting my priorities because most of my time I'm working for others. As a
mm,
leader, you called servant
mm,
leadership, right? I'm working
mm,
for others. I can't
mm,
afford to be worn down and not be clear in myself because I have to be there for them. I can't be a helipad missing 2 legs. I've taken on
right,
responsibilities. I owe things. So this time for me is really time for others. Because if I
yes,
don't take care, and I just think as we're sitting here on your podcast where you have leader after leader come on, we
mm,
know they all, if they don't take care of themselves, they're going to let down the people who are looking to them for support. So I, I, I feel like taking care of me is part of taking care of others.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. I just learned something. I didn't know helipads had legs, so that's how
I
much
don't
I
know if
take
they do either. I
about
may
it.
have made that up.
Oh, okay,
I may have made that
okay,
up.
okay, okay. But maybe they do. And then also just going to your point about taking care of yourself, I feel like the leaders who tend to, going back to the fire analogy, light fires under people oftentimes. I know I experienced this when somebody was trying to lead me and very poorly for about 3 months, which is why it didn't last any longer than 3 months.
Right.
Candidly, is that there was a level of insecurity and uncertainty in that person,
Mm-hmm.
much like bullies, candidly, on the schoolyard, where I always say, I may have said it to you once before, but it's something, a mantra that I say over and over again, especially since I have small children, which is that hurt people,
Mm-hmm.
and happy people help people, right? And I think that when they're hurt, that's how it comes out. And I feel like when people are to your point, are taking care of themselves, they do have the ability to not only be a helipad, but to even ex- extend that helipad,
Right.
right? Make it so that you have a jumbo
Right.
helicopter, whatever that
You have
means,
more
as
capacity.
opposed,
If you're
yeah.
spiritually, mentally, and physically fit, your capacity to help
Mm-hmm.
others is greater. Absolutely. I think you're right on.
Yes. Yes.
Hurt people, happy people, help people.
Yeah.
Jay Webb loves that. That's really good.
Yeah. So we've come to the end of the hour here, which feels like it just flew by. I don't like. I admire people like Tim Ferriss who, he'll do a 2.5 hour podcast. I'm like, like sometimes I feel like I need that too because there's just so much ground to cover, and I feel like we're just getting started. But I appreciate your time here and enlightening me and sharing all of your experience with my audience. The only part that's left here, Mark, is a feature that I call the Rapid Fire Five, where I ask you 5 questions, give me 5 answers, and then there'll be a bonus question where I'm going to ask you a question that one of my previous guests wanted me to ask you, or they didn't know it was going to be
Right.
you, but basically the next guest, and then I'll ask the same of you. So you ready for that?
Yep.
All right. First question, very simply, what motivates you now?
Love for my wife and my children.
Name a big goal you have right now and when you would like to accomplish it.
I want to become a great black and white photographer over the next 3 to 5 years.
What's your most preferred way to learn new information?
Ooh, this is tough. Read or podcast. It's a tie.
How many hours of sleep do you average per night?
7 hours and 20 minutes.
Okay. Wait, I got to ask. About 7 hours and 20 minutes. That's the average. Is that because you know that through your sleep app or
Yeah, I
like your
stopped tracking
smartwatch?
it, but I'd done it for a while, and that's when I felt the bad. Yeah, it was through an app. Yeah.
Got
But
it.
I don't use it
Got it.
anymore,
Okay.
but I wanted to get a sense of where I was. Yeah.
Yeah, got it. Okay. I was wondering where that came. What's your favorite thing to do when you aren't working?
Listen to music.
And bonus question, what's the most challenging situation you had and how did you overcome it?
We don't have,
I guess that could be personally and
yeah,
professionally, I
we don't have enough time. That would be another hour.
guess. That's what I mean, see?
Yes. Yes. I actually talked about it on the Dadcast with the passing of my brother and my father in an 18-month period, and at in the ages of 26 to 28, and then having to keep my life on track and my responsibilities to my wife and my future. And I overcame it through the life plan and good coaching.
It's amazing. Yeah, for sure. That will definitely shape you, for sure. And that was certainly inspiring and touching. The question that I have, or what question would you want me to ask my next guest?
Who is their favorite artist?
Who is their favorite artist? It reminds me of one of the questions I had in the past, which was, "What is your walk-up music?" Which I thought
Oh,
was
there you
pretty
go.
cool.
That's a good one.
So, yeah. Who is your
Jay, this
favorite
was a
artist?
ton
I
of
love it.
fun. This was great.
Yeah, I love this. I really did. I knew I was going to, based on the conversation that we had prior. So, I'm super excited to share this with everybody. One last question. How can folks reach out to you to say thank you? Perhaps maybe ask you some follow-up questions that I was neglecting to ask. What's the best way?
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn, and my work email is mark.nussbaum at Dexian.com, DEXIAN. But LinkedIn, I check my emails and I accept almost all, and that's probably the best place.
Fantastic. Mark, don't go anywhere yet. I'm going to say goodbye to the audience. Everybody, thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to check out Customer Conversations, where I interview customers about their buying process and how they go by from beginning to identifying a problem to ultimately making the decision to make a purchase of perhaps your technology. That's Customer Conversations. You can find it in the show notes. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you for listening.